What happens when one of Hollywood's boldest young stars steps into a room full of opinionated hosts and finds herself cornered on live television? The air in the studio seemed to tighten as Florence Pugh took her seat at the center table on The View. The audience clapped, the cameras rolled, and in that moment, no one knew they were about to witness a moment that would echo across the internet for days to come. Before we dive into the storm that unfolded, make sure you subscribe to Show a Buster Stories and hit that like button. This is where we unravel the real stories behind the talk show moments that leave America divided. Now, let's step into that room. Florence had come to promote her latest film, a psychological drama that had critics raving. She was radiant but grounded. Her confidence understated, her tone calm. Dressed in a deep emerald suit that shimmered subtly under the lights, she looked every bit the modern star, intelligent, fearless, and real. Joy leaned forward, her trademark smirk soft at first, but edged with curiosity. "So, Florence," she began, "this new movie of yours, it's about power dynamics, right? Women fighting for control. Kind of reminds me of Hollywood itself. You've spoken about not wanting to be objectified, but isn't that kind of the business you're in?" There was a flicker in Florence's eyes. She tilted her head slightly, smiling. But it was the kind of smile that carries warning signs if you know how to read them. "I think," Florence said softly, "that's exactly the problem, Joy. We keep saying it's the business we're in. As if it can't change. Maybe it can. Maybe it should." The audience hummed, a quiet agreement rippling across the studio. Joy wasn't finished. She chuckled lightly, turning to the other co-hosts. "Well, good luck changing Hollywood, honey. Men have been running that show for 100 years. You think a few TikTok posts are going to fix it?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. Florence's smile faded. "With respect," she said, her tone tightening. "This isn't about TikTok. It's about respect, something we shouldn't still be negotiating in 2025. The shift was immediate. The room, moments ago full of easy chatter, fell silent. Whoopi raised her brows, glancing between them. Sunny host leaned forward, sensing the tension. Anna Navarro crossed her legs, her eyes glinting like she knew a storm was brewing. Joy blinked, surprised at the pushback. "I'm just saying," she started again. "We've all dealt with the industry in our own way. You learn to toughen up. It's not personal." But Florence wasn't letting it slide. "That's exactly what people say right before they excuse bad behavior," she said, her British accent sharpening slightly with emotion. "When someone's disrespected, it is personal. Pretending otherwise just lets the problem keep going." A murmur ran through the audience, half applause, half disbelief. Joy tried to pivot, but Florence leaned forward, her voice low and steady. "You've been on this show for decades, Joy. You've called out people for less. Why minimize it now?" The air turned electric. Whoopi shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "Okay, now ladies," but her voice was drowned out by the tension between them. Florence's words weren't angry. They were cutting in their honesty. Every syllable carried the weight of someone who had endured being told to toughen up, smile more, and play along. And now she was done pretending. Joy leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing slightly. "Sweetie, I'm not minimizing anything. I'm just saying you can't expect the world to hand you respect. You earn it." Florence inhaled deeply. The audience waited. "Respect isn't something you earn by keeping quiet," she said, her tone trembling just slightly, but her gaze unwavering. "It's something we should all give, especially to each other." The camera zoomed in, catching the small twitch at the corner of Joy's mouth. The host's practiced composure faltered just for a second. She wasn't used to guests talking back. Certainly not like this. Whoopi tried again to ease the tension. All right. Let's stay on track," she said, chuckling nervously. "We're going to get letters if we keep going." But the damage was done. Florence's message had landed, and the audience knew it. Someone in the back shouted, "You tell her, Florence!" And laughter and applause rippled through the crowd. Joy forced a smile, but her tone carried a bite. "Well, Florence, it's clear you have your opinions. Maybe next time you'll run Hollywood instead of starring in it." The sarcasm hit like a spark. Florence leaned back, meeting Joy's eyes with a look that was equal parts grace and defiance. "Maybe I will," she said quietly. "At least then people might start listening instead of laughing." The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. The cameras captured every second. Florence's expression raw, Joy's eyes flashing, and the hosts frozen in uneasy stillness. When the show cut to a commercial break, the audience erupted into whispers. Some clapped for Florence, others exchanged nervous glances, and the energy was unmistakable. A moment had just happened, one that couldn't be undone. As the lights dimmed, Florence leaned back in her chair, exhaling. Joy adjusted her notes, pretending to read. Neither woman spoke, but their silence said everything. And in that moment, Florence Pugh, who had come to talk about a movie, had instead made a statement. One that no one expected, but everyone felt. What happened next would push the room even further to a confrontation that blurred the line between professionalism and pride. The studio lights dimmed as the theme music faded. Crew members skewered across the floor, whispering into headsets, pretending not to notice the ice-cold silence at the center table. Florence sat still, hands folded in her lap, her jaw tight but calm. Joy shuffled her note cards, her face an unreadable mask. It was only a 60-second break, but it felt like a lifetime. "Are you all right?" Whoopi asked quietly, leaning toward Florence. Florence nodded, forcing a faint smile. "I'm fine," she said. But the tone was clipped, measured, a woman steadying herself before the next wave. From across the table, Joy glanced up. "Hey," she muttered under her breath. "No hard feelings. You've got opinions. I respect that." Florence looked at her, eyes sharp, but not cruel. "It's not about opinions," she said softly. "It's about listening." Before Joy could reply, the producer's voice echoed from behind the cameras. "We're live in 32. The red light blinked back on. Whoopi flashed her practice smile. "Welcome back to The View. We're here with Florence Pugh, star of the new psychological drama, The Hollow Light, and we were just getting into a very spirited conversation." The audience laughed nervously. Florence smiled politely, but her gaze lingered on Joy, whose expression was carefully neutral. Sunny host jumped in, trying to steer the conversation to safer ground. "Florence, your character in this film is all about reclaiming her voice after years of being silenced. Do you feel like that resonates with you personally, especially as a young woman in Hollywood?" Florence exhaled, her body relaxing slightly. "Yes," she said, "it does, because for years we're told that being quiet means being professional. That smiling means you're strong. But that's not strength. Strength is saying something when it's uncomfortable." A few claps rose from the audience. The camera panned to Joy, who nodded slowly. "That's fair," she said. "But sometimes speaking up can come across as, aggressive." The tone was casual, but Florence heard the subtext. She turned her head, her voice still calm but firmer now. "Why is it that when a man speaks up, he's confident, but when a woman does, she's aggressive?" The studio went silent again. Joy blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't say that," she replied, defensive now. "I just mean tone matters." Florence leaned forward slightly. "Tone matters when someone's trying to hurt you. But when you're trying to protect yourself, tone is survival." The audience gasped softly. Whoopi closed her eyes for a moment, muttering, "Lord, this coffee ain't strong enough." Anna Navarro smirked, whispering to Sunny, "This just got real." Joy tried to laugh it off, but her voice trembled just enough for the mic to catch it. "You're a passionate one, Florence. I'll give you that. Maybe a little too passionate sometimes." That did it. Florence's composure cracked for just a heartbeat, revealing the exhaustion beneath. "Too passionate," she said, repeating the words slowly. "That's what they say when they want to make you smaller. When they don't want to hear what you're really saying." The crowd clapped again, louder this time. Florence's voice grew stronger. "I grew up watching women on shows like this, thinking, wow, they are fearless. But now I see how often that fearlessness gets mocked or brushed aside the moment it makes someone uncomfortable." Joy crossed her arms. "Are you saying I'm mocking you?" Florence met her gaze. "I'm saying sometimes we forget how easily we become part of the same system we once fought against." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't cruel. It was said with the weight of truth, and that made it as to more than anger ever could. Whoopi jumped in again, her voice breaking the tension like a life raft. Okay, let's all breathe for a second, she said with a half-laugh. I don't need to referee today. The audience laughed, but nervously. Everyone knew something had shifted in that room. Florence took a deep breath. Look, she said, turning slightly toward Joy, her tone softening. I'm not here to fight you. I just want us to stop pretending these conversations aren't personal. Because for women like me, for anyone who's had to defend their worth, it is personal. Joy hesitated. For a brief second, she seemed almost remorseful. I get that, she said quietly. Maybe I came at it wrong. Florence nodded once. Maybe we both did. The tension broke just enough for the audience to exhale. There was polite applause, but then Anna, sensing the viral potential of the moment, jumped in with a grin. You know, Joy, you always say you love guests who push back. Guess you got what you asked for. The audience burst into laughter, and even Whoopi chuckled, shaking her head. Florence smiled faintly. I didn't mean to start a battle, she said. I just think conversations like this matter. If we can't talk about respect here on national television, then where can we? It was a line that landed perfectly, genuine, humble, and unfiltered. Joy gave a slow nod, then glanced toward the audience. Fair point, she said, her voice softening. You're tough, kid. I like that. For a brief second, the two women shared something real. A truce, maybe. But beneath the calm, there was still that unspoken edge, that tension that hadn't quite dissolved. Whoopi turned to the camera with her signature warmth. Well, she said, grinning, I think we just witnessed the next generation taking charge. Florence, Pugh, everyone, reminding us that sometimes you've got to stir the pot to get to the truth. The audience applauded loudly. Florence smiled, thanking them, her eyes glimmering with both relief and resolve. But behind the applause, the energy remained heavy, charged. As the cameras cut away again, Florence turned slightly toward Joy. You know, she said quietly, I meant what I said. We all need to do better. Me included. Joy exhaled, nodding. You gave me something to think about, kid, she replied. Doesn't happen often. Florence smiled politely, but her eyes betrayed the adrenaline still coursing through her. From the sidelines, producers were already whispering. Someone muttered, that clip's going viral before lunch. They were right. The exchange wasn't just television. It was a moment, raw, real, and impossible to script. Florence leaned back in her chair, unaware that across social media, the first few seconds of their clash were already being clipped, shared, and captioned. Florence Pugh stands up to Joy Behar live on The View. And as the final segment approached, no one realized it wasn't over yet, because when the cameras came back one last time, things would take a turn no one expected. The red light blinked back on. The View's familiar music played one last time, and the audience clapped as the hosts returned from the second break. The tension, though masked by smiles, was palpable, hanging in the air like static before a storm. Whoopi opened with her usual calm professionalism. We're back with Florence Pugh, she said, her voice smooth but weary. We've been talking about her new film, The Hollow Light, and the powerful themes of identity and self-worth that run through it. Florence smiled graciously, nodding, though her fingers tapped rhythmically on the table. A small tell that she was still on edge. She'd handled tough interviews before, but there was something about this one that felt different. The stakes weren't just about her film anymore. They were about her voice. Joy leaned forward, her tone deceptively casual. Before we wrap up, she began, I just want to clear the air a bit. I didn't mean to upset you earlier, Florence. I was just having a conversation, you know. Florence turned toward her, keeping her voice even. I understand, Joy. I just think sometimes the way we frame things matters. Joy gave a short laugh. Oh, believe me, I've been framed for things my whole life. She smirked, turning to the audience, who chuckled politely. It's daytime TV, darling. We argue, we make up. Everyone goes home happy. The comic got a laugh, but Florence didn't smile. She tilted her head slightly. Except not everyone gets to go home happy when the arguments are about who deserves to be heard. The laughter faded. Joy blinked, clearly not expecting the pushback again. Well, I mean, if we can't debate ideas, what's the point of having a show like this? Florence nodded slowly. Debate is fine, she said. But when one side keeps dismissing the other, it stops being a debate. It becomes a performance, the audience murmured. Whoopi sighed, audibly muttering, "Oh boy, here we go again." Sunny leaned in slightly, trying to mediate. "I think what Florence is saying," she began carefully, "is that sometimes even well-meaning discussions can feel like—" But Florence cut in, her voice soft but firm. "It's not even about feelings. It's about awareness. You can't claim to be part of the conversation if you don't see how your words affect people." The words hung in the air. Joy gave a tight smile. "I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, sweetheart. Trust me, I know how words work." The tone, half dismissive, half mocking, landed wrong. Florence's posture changed. She straightened her back, her expression hardening, her voice dropping to a controlled whisper that somehow felt louder than a shout. "Then maybe you should use them more carefully." The audience gasped. Joy's smile faltered. "Excuse me." Florence's eyes flashed, not with anger, but something sharper. "Resolve. You talk about respect like it's something you've already mastered. But I watched you laugh at me earlier when I spoke about it. That's not respect. That's entertainment." Joy leaned back, visibly uncomfortable. "Now hold on, Florence." "No," Florence interrupted. Her voice rose, not yelling, but enough to command the entire room. "You called me sweetheart. You told me I was too passionate. You laughed at a problem I've lived with my entire career. And now you want to play it off like it's just TV. Maybe it's a joke to you, but it's my life." The crowd fell utterly silent. Even the sound of cameras worrying seemed to pause. Whoopi glanced toward the control room, whispering, "Do not cut. We're keeping this." Florence's words poured out, her voice trembling only from emotion. "I've sat in meetings with men twice my age, telling me how to talk, how to dress, how to behave. And every time I spoke up, I was called difficult, dramatic, emotional. And I'm standing here on a show run by women, hearing the same thing all over again." The audience broke into applause, spontaneous, loud, and charged. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but her voice was drowned out. She looked out at the clapping crowd, her face re-eaning, not with anger, but embarrassment. Florence continued, her voice softening, but still fierce. "You say you've been in this business longer than me, Joy. That's exactly why I hoped you'd understand. But the way you spoke, it felt like you were telling me to stay quiet, to play nice." Joy's lips parted, but no words came out. Florence exhaled shakily. "I'm done playing nice." That line hit like thunder. The audience rose to their feet. Some clapped, others just stared, captivated, caught between admiration and disbelief. Whoopi tried to regain control of the chaos. All right, ladies. Let's not." But Florence wasn't finished. "No, it's okay," she said softly. "I'm not angry. I want to stop this cycle. We can disagree, but let's not make belittling each other part of the entertainment because somewhere there's a young woman watching this, thinking she has to laugh it off, too." Her voice cracked slightly on the last sentence, and that was what broke the room. The applause this time was genuine, erupting from all corners of the studio. Joy sat still, absorbing it. For once, she didn't have a comeback. When the clapping died down, she spoke quietly, almost tenderly. "I didn't mean to make you feel small," she said. "You're right. Maybe I forget how much things have changed." Florence nodded, her expression softening. "We all do sometimes." Whoopi took a deep breath and smiled tightly at the camera. "This is The View, y'all. We talk, we clash, and sometimes maybe we learn something, too." Laughter rippled through the audience, easing the tension slightly. The floor manager motioned to wrap up, but Joy looked at Florence again. "You know," she said, half joking, half sincere, "you remind me of myself when I was your age. Except you've got way better clothes." Florence laughed for the first time that morning. The audience laughed with her, but even through the humor, the emotion lingered. When the credits rolled, Florence sat quietly, her heart still pounding. She hadn't planned to snap, hadn't even realized how deeply it had hit her until she spoke. Yet, Something about standing her ground on that stage felt right. Liberating. As the camera pulled back, the last shot caught her smile. Tired, but genuine. The kind of smile that comes after telling the truth, no matter the cost. What no one saw, though, was Joy's face when the lights dimmed again. The momentary look of reflection, maybe even regret, before she stood and walked off stage without a word. The confrontation might have ended on air, but its ripples were only just beginning to spread. Because by the time Florence reached her car outside, her phone was already buzzing with notifications. Millions had seen it, and the world had something to say. By the time Florence stepped out of the studio, the New York air was biting cold. She pulled her coat tighter, her phone still buzzing non-stop in her hand. Every notification was a pulse of noise. Tweets, headlines, video clips. The confrontation had already hit the internet like wildfire. The clip was everywhere. Florence Pugh stands up to Joy Behar live on The View. Tense moment shocks audience as Florence Pugh fires back. Some headlines called it inspiring, others called it overblown, but everyone was talking. Her publicist, Ava, walked briskly beside her, trying to keep up. It's going viral, Florence. Every outlet's running with it. TMZ, Variety, even BBC. Florence stopped in the middle of the sidewalk looking at her phone. The video already had millions of views. Comment sections were filled with people debating. Some defending Joy, others praising Florence for her composure and courage. One comment read, "Florence didn't raise her voice once, but she said everything women have wanted to say for years." Another said, "Joy was out of line. Florence handled that like a queen." But there were others, harsher ones. "She's too sensitive. It's just TV. She can't take a joke. No wonder she's in those serious art films." Florence scrolled silently. Her reflection caught in the phone screen, eyes tired but unwavering. She sighed, pocketing it finally. "It's strange," she murmured. "People are either calling me brave or dramatic. Nothing in between." Ava smiled gently. "That means you hit a nerve. You told the truth." Inside the studio, Joy sat in her dressing room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her makeup was still perfect, but her eyes told a different story. The silence in the room was heavy. On her phone, clips of the confrontation played again and again. Each replay a reminder of how quickly things had spiraled. She frowned as she read through comments. Some defended her. Many didn't. The words stung more than she expected. "Joy S. Florence an apology. This isn't 1997. Stop calling women sweetheart." Behar's tone was dismissive, plain, and simple. She set her phone down, exhaling deeply. For years, Joy had prided herself on being sharp-tongued, fearless, outspoken. But for the first time, she wondered if that same sharpness had dulled her empathy. A knock at her door pulled her out of her thoughts. Whoopi peeked in quiet and cautious. "You okay?" Joy managed a small smile. "I'm fine, just thinking." Whoopi walked in, closing the door behind her. "That was one hell of a show," she said softly. "She's a tough one." Joy nodded. "Yeah, reminds me of myself. Except maybe. She knows how to say what I used to mean." There was a long pause. "You going to call her?" Whoopi asked. Joy stared at the mirror again. "Maybe I should." Across the city, Florence sat in her hotel room, still processing. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. It was Joy. "Hey, didn't mean for things to go that way today. You made me think. Maybe that's a good thing." Florence stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Thank you, Joy. I didn't mean to snap either. I just couldn't stay quiet. Maybe that's a good thing, too." She hit send, setting the phone down beside her. Outside, the city lights flickered through the window. New York alive and restless as ever. The next morning, headlines took a softer tone. Florence Pugh and Joy Behar exchanged powerful words on The View. Not a feud, a conversation. Pugh stand sparks national dialogue. Clips flooded TikTok stitched with messages of solidarity. Women of all ages shared their own stories of being dismissed, laughed at, or told to calm down. The hashtag #ListenWhenWeSpeak trended for days. Florence watched one video. A young woman, maybe 19, sang through tears. When Florence said, "I'm done playing nice. I felt that because I've been there." Florence's eyes welled slightly. She whispered to herself, "Then it was worth it." Meanwhile, The View's next episode opened differently. Whoopi started the show with a deep breath. "Before we get into today's hot topics, we just want to say it's okay to disagree. It's okay to speak your truth." Yesterday's moment with Florence Pugh reminded us that passion and respect can coexist. Joy nodded beside her, her tone sincere. "Yeah, I've been doing this a long time, folks. Sometimes you forget how powerful words can be until someone reminds you." The audience applauded. It wasn't a forced reconciliation. It was something better, mutual understanding. Later that week, Florence returned to her routine, promoting her film with calm confidence. But something about her had changed. When interviewers asked about the View moment, she smiled faintly. "It wasn't about confrontation," she said. "It was about clarity. Sometimes standing up isn't about shouting. It's about refusing to shrink, and those words stuck." Clips of that answer spread just as widely as the confrontation itself. Think pieces followed. Morning shows debated it. Even Joy brought it up again on The View, saying, "Florence Pugh didn't just stand up to me. She stood up for herself, and that's something I can respect." The audience cheered. By the end of the month, Florence's moment on The View wasn't remembered as a fight. It was remembered as a statement. A moment where two generations of women collided, challenged each other, and somehow walked away with a deeper understanding of what strength really looks like. And while the internet eventually moved on, that clip still lived in countless timelines. A snapshot of courage, emotion, and the messy, beautiful art of speaking up. The final shot fades in. Florence walking down a quiet street, coffee in hand, hood up, a soft smile on her face as the morning light breaks through the city haze. The narrator's voice cuts through the quiet. "Sometimes the moments that shake us are the ones that free us." Florence Pugh didn't just have a heated exchange. She reminded millions watching that dignity isn't something granted. It's something claimed. And in that studio, under the glare of the cameras, she did just that. The music swells, soft piano, emotional, reflective. What do you think about Florence's reaction? Was she right to confront Joy on air, or did things go too far? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more explosive emotional stories that pull back the curtain on the moments that change everything. Because behind every headline, there's a heartbeat. The screen fades to